The wind howled through the trees outside Alex's small cabin, tucked away in the middle of nowhere. He sat by the fireplace, flipping through an old journal filled with sketches of alien landscapes and scribbled notes from his days as a space explorer. Those days felt like another life. Adventurous, dangerous, and filled with moments he could never forget, no matter how much time passed. One memory, in particular, refused to leave him. The mysterious alien woman, Vaxira. Alex sighed, staring at the sketch he had drawn of her years ago. Her angular features, shimmering violet eyes, and the soft glow of her skin made her look both otherworldly and captivating. She wasn't just an alien to him. She had saved his life during a mission that had gone terribly wrong. He had thought about her countless times since then, wondering what had happened to her after their paths had separated. The storm outside intensified. The wind rattled the windows, and a strange hum vibrated through the air. Alex frowned and set the journal down. That sound wasn't the wind. It was faint but distinct, almost like the low thrum of an engine. He stood up, moving cautiously toward the window. Outside, the night sky was lit with streaks of lightning, but something else caught his attention. A faint, glowing light pulsed beyond the tree line. His heart raced. It couldn't be, could it? Before he could process the thought, a shadow moved outside. A figure approached his cabin, walking with purpose yet cautiously, as though unsure of their welcome. Alex's instincts kicked in, and he grabbed the plasma pistol he kept hidden near the door, a remnant from his exploration days. The knock on the door was soft but deliberate. Alex hesitated for a moment before swinging it open, his weapon at the ready. Standing there, drenched from the rain, but unbothered by it, was Kyra. "Alex," she said, her voice smooth and familiar, as if no time had passed. For a moment, Alex could only stare. She looked almost the same as he remembered, ageless, ethereal, and undeniably alien. The faint glow of her skin illuminated her face, and her violet eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "Zira?" he finally managed to say, lowering the pistol but not entirely relaxing. What are you doing here?" Her lips curved into a small smile, but there was something guarded in her expression. "May I come in? It's complicated." Alex stepped aside, his mind racing with questions. As she entered, the cabin's warm light highlighted the intricate patterns on her skin, markings that seemed to shift subtly as she moved. Zyra glanced around the room, her gaze lingering on the open journal on the table. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the sketch of her face. "You still remember," she said softly. "Hard to forget someone who saved my life," Alex replied, crossing his arms. "But you disappeared without a word. I never thought I'd see you again." "I didn't have a choice," Zyra said, her voice tinged with regret. She placed the journal back on the table and turned to face him. "I came back because I couldn't stay away." Alex raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "After all these years, why now?" Zyra hesitated, as though searching for the right words. "Because I made a mistake. Leaving you. It was against everything I felt. But my people don't allow attachments with outsiders. It's forbidden." Alex's jaw tightened, and you suddenly decided to break their rules. "Why?" Before she could answer, the faint hum Alex had heard earlier grew louder, vibrating through the walls of the cabin. Zyra's expression darkened, and she moved toward the window, peering out into the storm. "They followed me," she said in a low voice. "Who?" Alex asked, stepping closer. "The Illyrian Watchers," she replied. "My people sent them to bring me back, or worse, and I'm not the only one after me. There's another group, far more dangerous." Alex's mind raced. He wasn't sure what he had expected when he opened the door, but it certainly wasn't this. Zyra, the woman who had been a fleeting but unforgettable part of his life, was now standing in his home, hunted by enemies he didn't understand. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, though the words felt hollow. "I had no choice," Zyra said, her voice steady. "I came because you're the only one I trust. And because—" She paused, meeting his eyes. "Because I couldn't let go of you, Alex, even after all these years." The storm raged on outside, but inside the cabin, a different kind of storm brewed. One filled with unspoken emotions, unanswered questions, and a danger that loomed closer with every passing second. The air inside the cabin felt heavy with tension as Kyra stepped away from the window. The low hum that had been growing louder now faded into silence, but Alex knew it wouldn't last. Whoever was following her wouldn't give up so easily. "I need answers, Kyra," Alex said, his voice firm but not harsh. "You can't just show up after all this time, hunted by who knows what, and expect me to roll with it." Kyra nodded, folding her arms across her chest. She seemed smaller now, almost vulnerable, despite her alien elegance. "I owe you that much," she said softly. She turned to face him, her violet eyes gleaming with a mix of determination and regret. "But first, I need to know, can I trust you?" Alex let out a humorless chuckle. "You're the one who disappeared, remember? I think the trust question goes both ways." Kyra didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "I left because I had no choice. My people, they're strict, cold. They see connections like ours as a weakness. I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" Alex's voice rose. "You left me in the middle of an intergalactic mess, Kyra. I barely made it out alive." Her face tightened with guilt. "I know, and I've carried that guilt every day since. That's why I'm here now, to make it right." Alex wanted to stay angry, but something in her voice, the raw sincerity, made it impossible. He sighed and rubbed his temples. "All right, start talking. Who's after you? And why did you come here of all places?" Kyra pulled a small device from her cloak, placing it on the table. It flickered to life, projecting a three-dimensional image into the air. The hologram showed a group of beings, tall, armored, and menacing, their faces hidden behind sleek helmets. "These are the Illyrian Watchers," Kyra said. "They're the enforcers of my people's laws. They've been hunting me ever since I defied them." Alex studied the projection. "What about the other group you mentioned? The more dangerous one?" The image shifted to show a different faction, alien figures with jagged armor and glowing red eyes. Their ships were sharp and predatory, built for war. "They're called the Zarthis," Kyra explained, her voice lowering. "They don't care about my people's rules. They want me because of what I can do." "And what can you do?" Alex asked, narrowing his eyes. Kyra hesitated, then held up her hand. The air around her fingers shimmered, and a soft, golden light began to pulse from her palm. The room felt warmer, the light soothing yet powerful. "It's called the Loomis Force," Kyra said. "It's rare even among my kind. The Zarthis want to harness it for their weapons. The Watchers want to suppress it because they fear it'll disrupt our society. Either way, I'm a target." Alex leaned back against the wall, taking it all in. He had faced danger before, pirates, rogue AI, hostile alien fauna, but this was something else entirely. "And you thought Earth was the best place to hide?" he asked. Kyra gave a small smile. "No one would expect me to come here, and I wanted to see you again." Her word hung in the air, leaving Alex unsure how to respond. Before he could think of anything to say, the cabin's lights flickered. A sudden chill ran through the room, and a faint vibration hummed through the floor. "They've found me," Kyra said, her voice sharp. She grabbed the device from the table and slipped it back into her cloak. "We need to move. Now." Alex grabbed his jacket and his plasma pistol, slipping into the mindset of the explorer he used to be. "Where are we going?" "There's an old resistance outpost not far from here," Kyra said. "It's hidden, but they might still have resources we can use." "Resistance?" Alex asked as he opened the door. The storm outside had calmed, but the air felt charged, as though something was about to happen. Not all Illyrians agree with the Watchers, Paxira explained as they stepped into the night. Some believe in freedom, in building bridges with other species. They helped me escape once. Maybe they can help us now. The two moved quickly through the forest, the crunch of leaves underfoot their only sound. The glow of Syra's skin provided just enough light to guide them, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Suddenly, a bright beam of light pierced the darkness, sweeping through the trees. Syra grabbed Alex's arm and pulled him down behind a fallen log. The beam passed over them, but it was followed by the unmistakable hum of a scout drone. "They're closer than I thought," Syra whispered. Alex tightened his grip on his pistol. "Then we'd better keep moving." As the two continued through the forest, Alex couldn't help but feel a strange mix of fear and excitement. Whatever was coming, it wouldn't be easy. But one thing was clear. He wasn't letting Syra face it alone. The forest was alive with tension. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves made Alex's heart race. He kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting to see the gleaming red eyes of a Zarthus soldier or the cold, calculating Watchers. Syra moved with practiced stealth, her glowing skin dimmed to avoid detection. Even in the middle of the chaos, Alex couldn't help but marvel at her presence. "Are we close?" Alex whispered as they crouched beneath a cluster of low-hanging branches. Syra nodded, pointing ahead. "There's an old transport hub buried underground, disguised as a cave. The Resistance used it to smuggle supplies in and out of Illyrian space. It should still be intact, if no one's found it." Alex raised an eyebrow. "If? That's not exactly comforting." Syra gave a small smile, the corners of her lips twitching upward. "Would you have stayed behind if I told you it was guaranteed to be safe?" Alex opened his mouth to retort but stopped. She was right. There was no way he'd have let her go alone, not after everything she'd told him. He sighed, shaking his head. "Let's hope your gamble pays off." As they pressed on, the faint hum of a scout drone buzzed through the air again, growing louder with each passing moment. Syra pulled Alex down into the underbrush, motioning for him to stay still. The drone's beam of light swept across the forest floor, inches from their hiding spot. Alex held his breath, gripping his plasma pistol tightly. He glanced at Syra, who was eerily calm, her glowing eyes fixed on the drone. She raised her hand, and a faint shimmer of golden light rippled in the air around them. The drone's beam passed over them, but didn't stop. It hovered for a moment before zipping away, its hum fading into the distance. Alex exhaled slowly, his pulse pounding in his ears. "What was that?" he whispered. "A cloaking field," Syra replied, her voice barely audible. "It doesn't last long, but it's enough to fool their sensors." "You've got more tricks up your sleeve than I thought," Alex said, impressed. "Let's just hope they're enough," Syra replied, standing and motioning for him to follow. After what felt like hours of weaving through the forest, they finally reached the cave. It was hidden behind a wall of dense foliage, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Syra pushed aside the vines, revealing the dark entrance. "This is it," she said, stepping inside. "The hub should be deeper in." Alex followed, his senses on high alert. The cave was damp and smelled of earth, but it felt secure, a welcome change from the open forest. As they moved deeper, the walls began to widen, and faint traces of old technology became visible: rusted metal panels, abandoned consoles, and flickering lights. "Looks like no one's been here in years," Alex said, running a hand over a dusty console. "That's good," Syra replied. "It means the Watchers and Zarthus haven't found it." She moved to the center of the room, where a large circular platform sat embedded in the ground. She knelt, placing her hand on a glowing panel next to it. The platform hummed to life, casting a soft blue light across the cave. This transport hub was used to move supplies between resistance cells, Syra explained. If it's still operational, we can use it to reach another safe zone. Can it handle both of us? Alex asked, eyeing the platform warily. It should, Kyra said, though there was a hint of doubt in her voice. But first, we need to make sure no one's tracking us. Alex frowned. How do we do that? Before Kyra could answer, a loud crash echoed through the cave. Both of them spun toward the entrance, where the faint glow of red lights pierced the darkness. They found us, Kyra said, her voice tight. Alex raised his pistol, stepping in front of her. How many? Too many, Kyra replied. She grabbed his arm. We don't have time to fight. Get on the platform. Alex hesitated, but the sound of footsteps and the metallic clinking of weapons grew louder. He stepped onto the platform as Kyra activated the controls. A shimmering field of light surrounded them, just as the first Zarthus soldier entered the cave. The soldier raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the platform surged with energy. Alex felt a strange pull as the world around him blurred and twisted. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the angry, glowing eyes of their pursuers. When the world came back into focus, Alex found himself in a dimly lit room filled with strange, glowing crystals. Kyra was beside him, her breathing unsteady. Where are we? Alex asked, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Somewhere safe. For now, Kyra said. But the look in her eyes told Alex that their troubles were far from over. Alex blinked as his eyes adjusted to the dim glow of the strange crystals surrounding them. The room was vast, its walls shimmering with faintly glowing veins that pulsed like a living organism. The air felt thick and charged, as if they had stepped into a place untouched by time. Where are we? Alex asked, his voice low as he scanned the cavern. A resistance sanctuary. Kyra replied, her voice barely above a whisper. This place is hidden deep within the folds of space. Only a few of us know its location. Alex crouched, running his fingers along one of the crystals. It felt warm to the touch, almost alive. Impressive. But how long can we stay here before they find us again? Sarah straightened, her posture tense. This sanctuary is cloaked from outside detection. For now, we're safe. But we can't stay here forever. The Zarthus and Watchers won't stop hunting me. And now you're a target too. Alex let out a sharp breath, standing and facing her. So what's the plan? You dragged me into this, Kyra. I need to know what we're up against and how we're going to fight back. Kyra hesitated, her glowing eyes meeting his. For a moment, Alex saw a flicker of doubt, a vulnerability she rarely showed. There's something I haven't told you, she began, her voice heavy with emotion. Alex folded his arms, waiting. The Lumis force I possess, it's not just a weapon or a tool. It's connected to something greater, something ancient. The Zarthus want to control it because it can alter the balance of power across the galaxy. And the Watchers, they fear it will upend the fragile peace among the Illyrians. If either side gets their hands on me, it could mean chaos. Alex frowned, processing her words. And what happens if you keep running? They'll never stop, will they? No, Kyra admitted, her voice barely audible. Which is why I came back to you, Alex. You're the only person I trust to help me. Why me? Alex asked, his voice rising. I'm just a guy who used to explore space. I'm not a hero. I don't have powers or an army to back me up. Sarah stepped closer, her expression earnest. You don't see it, but I do. You're more than what you think you are, Alex. You've faced impossible odds before and survived. You have the courage to do what's right, even when it's dangerous. That's why I need you. Alex shook his head, running a hand through his hair. You have a lot of faith in me for someone who vanished without a trace. I know I hurt you, Kyra said, her voice breaking slightly. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if I have to. But right now, we need to stop them before it's too late. Before Alex could respond, a low rumble echoed through the cavern. The crystals flickered, their glow dimming for a moment. Zyra's head snapped toward the sound, her body tensing. They're trying to breach the sanctuary's defenses. How is that possible? Alex asked, gripping his plasma pistol. The Zarthis have advanced tech. If they're close enough, they can disrupt the sanctuary's cloaking field. Zyra explained. She moved to a nearby console embedded in the wall, her fingers dancing across the controls. We need to prepare for a fight. Alex stood beside her, his mind racing. What kind of defenses does this place have? Limited, Zyra admitted. The sanctuary was designed as a refuge, not a fortress. But we can use the Lumis crystals to create a temporary energy barrier. It won't hold them off for long, but it might buy us time. Time for what? Alex asked. Zyra turned to him, determination blazing in her violet eyes. Time to activate the core. It's the sanctuary's last line of defense. If I channel my Lumis force into it, we can generate an energy pulse strong enough to drive them back, or destroy them. And what happens to you if you do that? Alex asked, narrowing his eyes. Zyra hesitated, and that was all the answer Alex needed. No, he said firmly. We'll find another way. I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself. There may not be another way, Zyra replied, her voice steady. If the Zarthis get through, it's over. For me, for you, and for anyone else who stands in their way. The rumbling grew louder, and the crystals flickered again. Alex clenched his fists, his mind racing for a solution. Finally, he took a deep breath, meeting Zyra's gaze. All right, he said. We'll do it your way. For now. But if this core thing doesn't work, we fight. Together. Zyra nodded, a small grateful smile tugging at her lips. Together. As they began working to channel the Lumis crystal's energy into the core, the rumbling turned into a deafening roar. The sanctuary trembled, and Alex knew their time was running out. Whatever was coming for them, they would face it side by side. The ground beneath the sanctuary trembled as the Zarthis forces intensified their attack. The flickering crystals cast eerie shadows across the cavern walls, amplifying the tension in the air. Alex stood beside Zyra, both moving quickly to set the sanctuary's defenses into motion. Are you sure this core thing won't blow us to bits? Alex asked, glancing at the glowing console where Zyra worked. The core is ancient but stable, Zyra replied, her voice steady despite the chaos. As long as I control the energy flow, it will focus the Lumis force outward, not inward. Trust me. Alex let out a dry laugh. Trust you? Sure. You only brought intergalactic bounty hunters to my doorstep. Zyra paused, her glowing eyes meeting his. I didn't mean for this to happen, Alex. But I'll fix it. I promise. Her sincerity softened Alex's frustration, and he nodded. All right. Let's make sure you don't have to make another apology. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the cavern, and a section of the wall crumbled. Red-eyed Zarthis soldiers poured in, their jagged armor glinting in the dim light. They moved with mechanical precision, weapons at the ready. Get behind cover. Alex shouted, pulling Zyra toward a cluster of crystals. He raised his plasma pistol and fired, the blue bolts of energy striking the closest soldier. The Zarthis staggered, but didn't fall. They've enhanced their armor, Zyra said, her voice tight. We need to disable their tech before they overwhelm us. Suggestions? Alex asked, ducking as a volley of plasma fire scorched the ground near them. The crystals. Zyra pointed to a cluster nearby. If we can overload them, the energy surge will short-circuit their suits. Overload. That sounds like a terrible idea. Alex muttered, but he didn't have a better plan. He fired at the base of the crystals, shattering their outer shells. A bright golden light erupted, sending a wave of energy rippling through the cavern. The Zarthis soldiers froze mid-step, their suits sparking violently. One by one, they collapsed, their systems temporarily disabled. It worked, Alex said, a note of surprise in his voice. Only for now, Zyra replied, already moving toward the core. More will come, and we won't be able to keep using the crystals like that. They'll destabilize the sanctuary. As Alex followed her, another tremor shook the ground. From the far end of the cavern, a new figure emerged, a towering Zarthus commander. Unlike the others, his armor seemed immune to the crystal's energy, and the glowing red blade in his hand hummed ominously. Well, that's not good, Alex muttered, gripping his pistol tighter. The commander pointed his blade at Styra, his voice a deep, guttural growl. Surrender the Loomis force, or face annihilation. Zyra stepped forward, her glowing skin brightening. You'll have to kill me first. Tyra. Alex began, but she raised a hand to stop him. The commander lunged, his blade slicing through the air. Zyra dodged with inhuman agility, her movements fluid and precise. She raised her hands, and a beam of golden light shot toward the commander, but he deflected it with ease. Alex fired his pistol, aiming for the weak points in the armor. The bolts hit their mark, but the commander barely flinched. Great. A walking tank, Alex muttered. Zyra shouted to him as she fought. Keep him distracted. I need time to activate the core. Easier said than done. Alex yelled back, rolling to avoid the commander's blade. He fired again, aiming for the joints in the armor. This time, the commander stumbled, snarling in frustration. Come on, big guy, Alex taunted, backing away to draw the commander's attention. Let's see what you've got. The commander roared, charging at Alex. He ducked just in time, the blade narrowly missing his head. Sweat dripped down his face as he scrambled to his feet, his mind racing for a way to slow the beast down. Meanwhile, Zyra stood before the core, her hands glowing brighter than ever. The massive crystal hummed to life, its light spreading throughout the cavern. She closed her eyes, focusing all her energy on stabilizing the flow. Hurry up, Zyra, Alex shouted as the commander closed in again. The core's glow intensified, and a pulse of energy rippled outward. The commander stopped mid-charge, his armor sparking wildly. He growled, struggling against the force, but it was too powerful. Zyra opened her eyes, her face pale but determined. Alex, get down. Without hesitation, Alex dove behind a cluster of crystals as the core unleashed a massive energy wave. The cavern shook violently, and the remaining Zarthus soldiers were thrown backward, their suits completely fried. When the light faded, the commander was gone, disintegrated by the blast. The cavern was eerily silent, save for the soft hum of the core. Alex stood, brushing himself off. Remind me never to question your plans again. Zyra smiled faintly, but her legs wobbled, and she nearly collapsed. Alex caught her, concern etched across his face. You okay? I'll be fine, she said weakly. But this isn't over. That was just one wave. They'll send more. Alex helped her stand, his expression firm. Then we'll be ready. Together. The cavern was still, its silence heavy with the aftermath of the battle. The glowing core pulsed gently, its energy stabilizing the sanctuary once more. Alex helped Zyra lean against a cluster of crystals, her glowing skin dim and her breathing uneven. You pushed yourself too hard, Alex said, his voice filled with concern. You need to rest. There's no time, Zyra replied, her voice weak but determined. That was only a scouting force. The Zarthus won't stop. The Watchers will be close behind. Alex frowned, kneeling beside her. Then we need a plan, and it can't involve you sacrificing yourself again. There has to be another way. Zyra hesitated, her glowing violet eyes locking with his. The core's pulse bought us time, but it also sent a signal. The resistance might have picked it up. If they're still out there, they'll come. Alex raised an eyebrow. You're betting on a group that might not even exist anymore. They exist, Zyra said firmly. And they'll come if they know I'm here. Before Alex could argue, a faint hum echoed through the cavern. His grip tightened on his plasma pistol as he stood, scanning the darkness. The sound grew louder, a steady rhythm that was too organized to be random. They're here already, Alex asked, tension in his voice. Zyra shook her head. No, that's not Sarthis tech. A beam of light cut through the darkness, followed by the faint outline of a ship descending into the cavern. Its sleek design glowed faintly with blue markings, and Alex immediately recognized the craftsmanship. It was Illyrian. The ship landed gracefully, its ramp extending with a hiss of air. A group of figures stepped out, their movements cautious but purposeful. At their lead was a tall Illyrian male, with markings similar to Xyra's, though his glow was less pronounced. His gaze fell on Xyra, softening with recognition. Kyra, he said, his tone a mix of relief and reprimand. You've caused quite the stir. Xyra stood, leaning slightly on Alex for support. Zalith, she said, her voice steadier now. I didn't think you'd come. You left us little choice, Zalith replied, his gaze shifting to Alex. And who is this? Alex, Xyra said simply. He's the reason I'm still alive. Zalith studied Alex for a moment before giving a slight nod. Then we owe you thanks. Let's skip the pleasantries, Alex said, his tone sharp. If you're here to help, we could use it. The Zarthis aren't far behind. Zalith's expression darkened. We know. Our sensors detected their fleet moving into this sector. They'll be here soon. Zyra stepped forward, regaining her composure. Then we need to combine forces. The Sanctuary's core can generate another pulse, but it won't hold them off forever. We need to strike at their command ship. Zalith hesitated. You know what you're asking, Xyra. If we attack, it'll escalate into open war. It's already war, Xyra said firmly. The Zarthis won't stop until they've taken the Loomis force, or destroyed it. We have to act now. Zalith looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. But this will require coordination. Alex, your knowledge of human tactics might be useful. Alex blinked, caught off guard. Human tactics? I'm not exactly a general. You've survived this long against impossible odds, Zalith replied. That makes you more qualified than most. Alex exchanged a glance with Xyra, then nodded reluctantly. All right, what's the plan? The group gathered around a holographic display projected by Zalith's ship. The Zarthis fleet loomed ominously in the projection, their command ship heavily armored and surrounded by smaller attack vessels. The command ship is the key, Zalith explained. If we take it out, the rest of their fleet will retreat, but it's heavily defended. That's where the Loomis force comes in. Kyra said, I can channel it directly into the core and amplify the Sanctuary's pulse. It'll create an opening for your ships to strike. Alex frowned. And what happens to you when you do that? Zyra met his gaze, her expression unreadable. It's a risk I'm willing to take. No, Alex said firmly. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Zyra said, her voice soft but resolute. This is our best chance. The room fell silent, the weight of her words pressing down on everyone. Finally, Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fine, but I'm staying with you. If this goes sideways, we go down together. Zyra's eyes softened, and for a moment, the tension between them eased. Thank you, Alex. Zalith nodded. Then we move quickly. Prepare yourselves. The Zarthis won't wait. As the Illyrians and Alex began preparations, Cyrus stood by the core, her glowing hands resting on its surface. She closed her eyes, focusing her energy. The crystals around her began to pulse brighter, filling the cavern with light. Alex watched her, his chest tightening with a mix of fear and admiration. He had no idea what would happen next, but one thing was certain. He wouldn't let Xyra face it alone. The cavern hummed with the rising energy of the Loomis crystals. Thyra stood in the center, her glowing hands pressed against the core as the light around her pulsed brighter with every passing moment. Alex stood nearby, gripping his plasma pistol, his nerves on edge. The Illyrian resistance forces moved swiftly, preparing their ships for what could be a decisive battle. Outside, the distant rumble of the Zarthus fleet grew louder, signaling the approach of their enemies. The air inside the sanctuary was thick with tension, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this might be their last stand. "Are you ready for this?" Alex asked, his voice steady but laced with concern. Ira glanced at him, her glowing violet eyes softening for a moment. "I have to be. If we don't stop them now, they'll destroy everything. This sanctuary, the Resistance, and eventually Earth." Alex nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Then let's make sure they don't win." Zeleth approached, his expression grim but resolute. "The Zarthus command ship is almost in range. Our fleet is positioned to strike as soon as the pulse creates an opening." Alex turned to the Illyrian leader. "And if the pulse doesn't work?" Zeleth's jaw tightened. "Then we fight until we can't." The sanctuary trembled as the first wave of Zarthus ships breached the outer defenses. The energy barrier flickered under the assault, and Alex could hear the faint echoes of their weapons pounding against the sanctuary shields. "They're testing our defenses," Zeleth said. "It won't be long before they launch a full-scale attack." Zyra took a deep breath, her glowing skin brightening as she focused her energy into the core. "I need a few more minutes to amplify the pulse. Can you hold them off until then?" Alex smirked, raising his pistol. "I'll do my best." The sanctuary erupted into chaos as Zarthus soldiers began to infiltrate. Their jagged armor gleamed in the dim light, and their weapons hissed with deadly energy. Alex fired his pistol, taking down the first soldier that charged. The Illyrian resistance forces joined the fray, their sleek weapons cutting through the enemy ranks with precision. "Keep them back," Zeleth shouted, his voice commanding over the din of battle. Alex ducked behind a crystal formation, firing at a group of Zarthus soldiers advancing on Exira. He could see the strain on her face as she poured her energy into the core, the light around her intensifying with each passing second. "They're getting closer," Alex yelled, his heart pounding as more soldiers poured into the cavern. Zeleth and his forces fought valiantly, but the Zarthus were relentless. Alex's pistol overheated, forcing him to resort to hand-to-hand combat. He tackled a soldier to the ground, using the jagged edge of a shattered crystal to disable its armor. As he stood, his gaze locked onto Xyra, who was now glowing so brightly that it was almost blinding. "Xyra," Alex shouted. "How much longer?" "Just a little more," she called back, her voice strained. "The pulse is almost ready." Suddenly, a loud roar echoed through the cavern as the Zarthus commander stepped forward, his massive frame cutting through the chaos. His red blade glowed ominously, and his eyes locked onto Xyra. "She's mine," the commander growled, advancing toward her. "Not on my watch," Alex muttered, charging at the commander. He fired his pistol, but the shots bounced harmlessly off the thick armor. The commander swung his blade, and Alex narrowly dodged, the heat of the weapon scorching the air around him. The fight was brutal. The commander's strength was overwhelming, and Alex struggled to hold his ground. He dodged another swing, using the terrain to his advantage. But he knew he couldn't keep this up forever. "Alex," Cyra's voice rang out, cutting through the noise. "Get down." Without hesitation, Alex dove to the ground as a massive wave of energy erupted from the core. The pulse surged outward, flooding the cavern with golden light. The Zarthus soldiers froze, their suits sparking and malfunctioning. Even the commander staggered, his blade extinguishing as his armor shorted out. The light continued to expand, reaching out beyond the sanctuary and into space. Through the holographic display, Alex could see the Zarthus fleet faltering, their ships caught in the pulse's energy. One by one, the smaller vessels lost power and the command ship's shields flickered before collapsing entirely. "Now's your chance," Zalith shouted to his fleet over the comms. The resistance ships surged forward, their weapons finding their mark. The Zarthus command ship exploded in a brilliant flash, its debris scattering into the void. The remaining enemy vessels retreated, their forces broken. As the light from the core faded, Alex scrambled to his feet, rushing to Xyra's side. She was slumped against the console, her glow dim and her breathing shallow. "Xyra," Alex said, his voice filled with worry. "Are you okay?" She opened her eyes, a weak smile on her face. "We did it, Alex. The Zarthus are gone." He helped her to her feet, holding her steady. "You scared me there for a second." "I told you I'd make it right," she said softly, leaning on him. Zalith approached, his expression one of gratitude. "You saved us all, Xyra. And you, Alex. The Resistance owes you both a debt." Alex shook his head. "Just make sure they don't come back." Xyra looked up at him, her violet eyes shining despite her exhaustion. "I couldn't have done it without you." As the survivors began to regroup and the sanctuary returned to calm, Alex realized something. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged. Together, he and Xyra had faced the impossible and won. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side.